There we go.
There we go.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Today's session is focusing on making the switch to Chromebooks. We'll introduce our team in just a moment and look forward to having a chat with those of you who are on with us today live. And again, thanks for taking the time to be with us now, or if you're watching this later. Want to pause for a quick moment and just acknowledge those of us on the Google team. We've got folks based in the Sydney area, and Steve is joining from New Zealand, but just wanted to pause and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which we'll center ourselves at, where the Google office in Sydney is based, and that's to honor the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, recognizing their continuing connection to the land, the waters, and the community. We pay our respects to them and to their cultures and elders past, present, and emerging. And I'll kick it over to Steve, who'd like to say a little acknowledgement for New Zealand.
Nice one, thanks. So, he aha te mea nui o te ao. Maku ki te atu, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. What is the most important thing in this world? Ask me and I will tell you. It is people, it is people, and it is people. I'd like to recognize the ancestors who came before us to enable us to be where we are today. Thanks, Brent.
Sorry for the slight delay. I just wanted to let you show your stuff off before, listen before read.
Awesome. Thanks very much.
Awesome. So you've met me, well, you've heard from me. My name is Brent. I'm the Google account manager, or lead, as you guess you could say, for New South Wales, ACT, and WA. Steve, who you just met, is the lead for New Zealand. And you'll also be hearing today from Chris Betcher and Richard Johnson. Chris is our program manager for G Suite and adoption, and Richard is our awesome solutions engineer that's going to run us through some of the tech side of things for us today. So quick agenda for, interestingly, my slides are showing up differently on my navigation screen than what they're showing up on. Anyway, it wouldn't be a day if we didn't have that little tech snafu here and there. So to quickly run you through today's agenda, just want to kind of give you the quick Google for Education overview, which I know many of you that have joined the call probably heard before, but yeah, just to kind of center us all on the same page, give us that same foundation. The essentials of Chromebook skills, comparing different apps that are out there. We're really lucky today to have a Chromebook user and to hear directly from someone who is using them in their school. So Sharon Cooper, who also happens to be a Google innovator, is joining us today as well. And then we'll just talk a little bit about finding the right Chromebook. It's crazy to think about how many there are out there now, especially when you look at the long list. And obviously, we want to make this as informative as possible. So we'll formalize a time at the end of the session for Q&A. But feel free in the chat or given that we have a relatively small group today, if you do have a question along the way, feel free to ask or just pop it in the chat. So just to walk through the basics of what I like to call the core offerings of the Google for Education team. Obviously, G Suite for Education is our collaborative software, which allows you to educators to get done what they need to get done in the classroom, everything from collaborate to managing the classroom, communicating, managing tasks. And for those IT folks on the call who are familiar with our solutions, obviously being able to administer everything within the Google ecosystem at scale from one admin console really streamlines what learning in the cloud can look like. Obviously happy to dive into that deeper if anyone needs it, but that's certainly our core software offering. One of the few things we like to always highlight is kind of the growth and the key features that we've seen over time. And yeah, we continue to evolve, docs and spreadsheets and slides. One of the newest things that we like to talk about is the fact that machine learning is actually built into a lot of these collaborative pieces more and more every day. The ability to automate and make folks' life easier with the machine learning power that Google brings certainly is something we like to highlight. And then, yeah, I think one of the things that is really relevant now and it's not so much a rah Google's, there are 140 million users, but when you think about 2020 and how the world has been turned upside down for all of us, I think the jump from roughly 100 million to 140 million active users in this year shows the power of technology and how it can help meet us no matter where we are and how we need to learn and work. And so, yes, we're proud to have so many users who give us great feedback and help us, have reasons to evolve our products and develop them, but also, it's exciting for us to see that our technology is hopefully helping you all do what you need to do, when and where you need to do it. With that, wanting to focus predominantly today on Chromebooks and why we've seen them go from 0 to over 9 million a year being sold in certain countries throughout the world. And it's really hard as a regional lead to kind of, what is the easiest way to summarize why Chromebooks? And I think what I always say is they just work. And that's it doesn't sound very exciting in many cases, but for folks that, especially in the classroom use case, are strapped for time and maybe don't have the resources to have, lots of folks managing and updating, and they just work. But what that translates to is being lightweight and durable. We build with educational users in mind, quick boot up time, and then really talking about the simplicity and affordability, and going back to that admin piece, that everything just works through the cloud. And one of the analogies I like to use is, in Australia, I'll use a local use case, even with my American accent. One of our highest concentrated school systems in the country would be the Australian Capital Territory. And so if I were an admin on there and within their admin console, I could log in and manage those Chromebooks here from Sydney with the flick of a few buttons, put them all into testing mode, or push out specific applications, which we'll talk about later. So that's the type of scale and cloud base that being based predominantly in the cloud really allows for.
Hey, Brent, I think you make a really good point there about the fact they just work. And I think we kind of downplay that point. But if you're looking at it from an IT side of things, to have a couple of thousand machines that just work and just work nicely and simply, but also nice and powerful enough to use in the classroom, is a super big point that I think we kind of forget.
I like to tell a quick story that, like, when I put Chromebooks into the school I was teaching at, I kind of did it by stealth. I didn't really ask permission, and we just bought a bunch of Chromebooks and put them into the school. And it was like 8 months down the track, and one of the teachers had a small problem, and she contacted IT, and she says, "Who do I get to fix this problem I'm having with the Chromebook?" And the IT guy says, "Do we have Chromebooks? I didn't even know we had Chromebooks. What's a Chromebook?" We literally had them for 8 months before anyone even realized, because nobody had ever had an issue with them.
And that's a good thing too. We always, if you need some information on the basics of learning, how Chromebooks work and things of that nature, let us know. In the same regard, it's great to, in a similar kind of scenario, I guess, to Chris's point, they're so simplistic. Sometimes you don't even know they're there. Or on the flip side, if you get them, I've worked with some schools that they're purchased because of affordability, and folks are like, "Oh, what do we do with these?" And it's so simple to just pick them up and run with them. And if you need those resources for getting started, we can certainly provide you with those as well. All right. So just again, we design Chromebooks. We are talking mostly specifically for the education use case today, but I'll mention here's kind of the audiences that we design for, and knowing what their unique needs are and focusing on that. Obviously, if you go into your local maybe Hi-Fi or Harvey Norman, or oh gosh, why am I blanking, Steve? New Zealand is PB Tech or
Noel Lemmings, yeah, or many other places.
we design Chromebooks for consumers. We design Chromebooks for the enterprise space, which we'll actually show you some of those at the end of the call today, because sometimes we need those high-tech enterprise devices in education for certain users. And then our team focuses specifically on education, and knowing that those are going home to families, especially to learn from home. But sometimes, teachers are using Chromebooks, students are using Chromebooks, IT admins. Everyone on this call, from a Google perspective, their primary device is a Chromebook. So it's one of those things I feel like we often, battle, if you will. It's like, oh, well, Chromebooks are just meant for students. And it's like, if you're working in the web, and especially if you're doing most of what you do on G Suite, all you need is a Chromebook, or you can definitely get done what you need to get done on a Chromebook. So again, I think we've highlighted this a bit already, but easy to use, flexible, scalable, collaboration first and foremost. We pride ourselves that we are the first web-based, fully collaborative operating system out there, and then we'll talk a little bit about security. So I'm going to stop rambling, and we will kick it over to our next presenter. And Rich is going to kindly pass the baton. You can see there that one of the new features is being able to pass baton. So Chris, all you.
That's interesting. The baton went to the wrong screen, but okay, there you go.
So having that same issue, I think that the baton is still being developed on the back end.
So I just want to talk to you guys about a few. Steve and I will kind of tag team this and talk to you about a few things about Chromebooks in general. And we're pitching this as someone who might not know a whole lot about Chromebooks. Or particularly has maybe come from a background where their primary machine's been a Windows machine or perhaps a Mac, and they come into the Chrome world, and like there are a few things that are different, even though many things are going to feel really familiar. I mean, if you look at a Chromebook, it looks like a regular computer. If you open it up, you see that pretty much lights up immediately. That was open by the time the lid was on. Trust me, it was actually off when the lid was closed, but it's that quick. And if you look at the keyboard on this, I mean, it just looks like a regular PC. If you take a closer look at the keyboard, though, you'll notice there are a couple of subtle differences. Oh, Rich, I might need you to drive here because there's a couple of animations on this screen, if you don't mind. And they're not seeming to do it custom mode. So, yeah, thanks. So those green buttons there, I mean, if you've used a Mac or Windows machine before, you're probably familiar with that row across the top that has like things like volume control and brightness of the screen. That's the obvious stuff. Next click, please, Rich. Over on the other side, because Chromebooks were designed as a web machine, they were designed with the web in mind first and foremost. We got rid of a few buttons that didn't make sense when you come to that web mode. So things like the forward and back button and the refresh button, they're buttons you typically find in your actual browser in software. We've got them as hard-coded buttons on the device itself because it really is designed for the web. Next click, please, Rich. Those two buttons in the middle there, they're a little bit special. The one on the left is a full screen button. A lot of Chromebooks, especially ones for schools, have smaller screens. I mean, Chromebooks come in all shapes and sizes, but a lot of the school ones, especially for the younger students, probably have like 11, 12-inch screens. By pressing that left button there, the yellow one, the full screen button, it actually removes all the toolbars and stuff at the top of the page and the bar across the bottom of the page, and it effectively gives you a bigger screen. So I always taught my kids, when you're browsing around, moving from tab to tab, that's fine. Leave it in regular Chrome mode. But when you get to the page you want to do some work on, just tap that button, go full screen. It gives you a much bigger working space to work on. It's a really much better experience. Mm-hmm. And the one next to that is the overview button. And if you've got multiple windows open and you press that overview button, they'll just spread out across the screen. You can pick the one you want, and then they all go back to normal. If you come from the Mac world, you're probably pretty familiar with that. Mac has a thing called I forget the name of it now, but it has a very similar feature. So it's exactly the same here. Next button, you've got down there where you would normally find a caps lock key, you've got this thing with a magnifying glass on it. And it's, believe it or not, its correct name is actually the everything key. I did not believe that until I checked it, but it's true. Yeah, it's called the everything key. When you press the everything key, it's got a little search button on it because it's a search tool. Google's pretty good at search. I don't know if you've come across that. But when you press that search button, what it does is it brings up an overlay at the bottom of the screen with a search box. Searching in that search box will search your machine. It'll search your drive. It'll search the web. It'll basically search everything in one place from one
the clever name.
Hence the everything key.
Yeah.
And the next click, Rich, is those three buttons there, and I guess there's some on the other side of the keyboard as well that match, and they're just the standard Shift, Control, and Alt keys. And the reason I highlight them is because just like most other computers, if you hold down the Control or the Alt or the Shift or some combination of those while you press other things, you can actually get a whole lot more functionality as well. So like, it is actually a really functional keyboard. It's built for the web, but it does a whole bunch of all the stuff you'd expect it to do as well. Can we go to the next slide? Just two little pro tips. Sorry, Rich, I'll get you to go back. There was two little pro tips there at the bottom, and I just wanted to highlight too. Two of the real common things people say when they come to a Chromebook keyboard, and if they've come from another platform, they kind of go, where's the delete key and where's the caps lock key, right? They miss those. In the top corner, you can see it says backspace. A backspace will delete the key, the character to the left when you're typing. If you want to delete the character to the right, just hold down Alt while you press backspace. That's a delete key. And if you want a caps lock key, just press Alt and the key where the caps lock normally would be, which is the everything key, and you'll get a temporary caps lock will turn on, and same thing to turn it off. So, you know, you've got all the keystrokes there, even though it looks like some are missing. The other thing is worth mentioning too, especially for younger students, you notice that the Chromebook keyboard is in lowercase letters. And it's one of the few keyboards on the market that actually has lowercase letters, and it makes an enormous amount of sense for younger students as well, because that's kind of where they do most of their learning about lettering when they're young. All right, now we can go to the next slide.
And apparently lowercase writing is easier to read than uppercase.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Unless you're shouting on Twitter, then of course, then you want to have all uppercase if you want to shout.
Hey, Steve, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, sure. So again, you know, trackpad usage is a thing that kind of, I was always the click and then the for ages, and using multiple things at once actually like really helped me work a lot better. So the 2-finger tap is like your old right click, as shown by Mr. Christopher there. Thank you very much. The 2-finger drag is the page scroll. Now this one, when I started using this, I thought, my goodness, when would I ever use this? But I use it all the time now. It's an absolutely fantastic little shortcut for dragging pages up and down. The 3-finger tab to expose different windows to see what's in behind. So if you're like me and you work on multiple screens, then you unplug everything and walk away and go, oh, where did that go? Then you can use your 3 fingers, drag it down, or on that last little slide we had a look at with exposing your different windows key, same sort of deal.
The overview button.
Yeah, and again, once I found that, I was like, I hit it the first time, I went, wow, that's cool. There's all my stuff. And the last one, the 3-finger swipe, is switching between tabs as well. So really nice way to do lots and lots of things with very simple commands. And I think you can kind of get the theme of what we're talking about here. Yep. It looks incredibly simple. Back to Brent's point, it just works and it's really simple, but we can also scale it up and it becomes far more complicated and far more able than we actually thought originally, which is the beauty of these amazing machines. All right, let's jump forward to the next one.
Those two-finger taps, 2-finger drags, 3-finger swipes. If you've used a Mac or a modern Windows machine, you should be pretty familiar with those. The 3-finger side to side where you move from tab to tab, I think that's pretty much unique to the Chromebook. I haven't seen that work anywhere else.
Yeah.
The Chrome OS has a file manager. So in Windows, you have a thing called Windows Explorer. On the Mac, you have a thing called Finder. On Chromebooks, you have a thing called the Chrome OS File Manager, or it's just called Files. Yeah. The easiest way to invoke files is to hit the everything key and just start typing FIL and it'll pop up. Right, it's the easiest way to find it, and just press enter and it launches. The file manager is exactly what it says. It's a place to manage files. You can drag things around, move them around. You can see from that little screenshot there, you can browse all the different file repositories on your machine. You've got My Drive and shared drives and shared with me drives. You can also browse an area called downloads. So all Chromebooks have a certain amount of onboard storage. It's typically not huge compared to Windows machines because it doesn't need to be, because it's primarily cloud-based. But most Chromebooks would have 32, 64, 128 gig of onboard storage, and you can access that using that downloads section there. We'll go to the next slide.
We had a pro tip from Rich, one of our previous webinars, about being able to set where the downloads go to, whether they are local or whether they are into your drive. And I mean, you know, if you're going to set it to your drive, then you don't really need to worry about the fact that things are going into your machine as well. So, hot tip from Rich.
Yeah, that's right. If you have a Chromebook and you're storing everything in Drive, and then the dog eats your Chromebook or something, like, you just get a new Chromebook and log in and everything's there. But if you stored things in the local storage in the download section there, then obviously that would be specific to that Chromebook. So we really recommend everyone just store everything in Drive. That way, totally. Again, if you're familiar with the Mac, you know that if you are browsing in Finder and you tap the spacebar on a file, it will open up in like a preview mode. We also have a similar thing happening now in Chrome OS. So if you've never tried that, just go to Chrome OS, browse in files, and if you see something there, tap the spacebar, it'll open up, give you a little preview and some information about the file. Next slide. One of the fascinating things I think about files is you can mount other file systems. So you might have, if you were observant, you might have noticed in that previous screenshot where I had down the bottom, I actually had Dropbox mounted as well. So if you've got access to Dropbox or OneDrive or a Windows file system or a Windows file server somewhere, you can actually mount those file systems as well and browse files on other file systems. So that's a pretty useful thing. It becomes a real jack of all trades. One to rule them all, Steve.
Exactly. I'm doing my crazy camera again.
One of the really nice things that's come into Chrome OS over the last probably 6 to 8 months or so, I suppose it's been around now, is virtual desks. When you go into overview mode, you've got a little button up in the top corner now that says new virtual desktop, and you can actually create up to 4 virtual desktops. So, for productivity, a lot of people like to plug their computer into another monitor, and so they have, the computer built-in monitor and the other monitor. But you actually have 4 virtual screens on a Chromebook as well, if you want. And so you can create these virtual desktops. And there's a great screenshot of it, a great photo there that kind of highlights it. Imagine you've got the screen on your computer plus one on either side, plus like another one as well. And by using that keyboard shortcut there, which is the everything key plus the square bracket, either of the square brackets to go either way, you can actually basically slide one screen off and the new screen slides in. And so you can have like 4 screens worth of stuff and just slide them around depending on what you need to see. Really productive if you put all your email and Drive stuff in one screen and maybe something else you're working on in another. And you can literally just sort of hop between screens very, very simply. Next slide. That black bar you see down the bottom of Chromebooks is called the shelf. That's its correct name. And it's a place where, just like on Windows, you'll see the little programs that are running down the bottom in the, what do they call it in Windows? The taskbar, I think it's called. The Mac calls it something else. But it's a feature of most modern computers. And that's where you see stuff running. Anything that's got a little highlight under it, like you can see the Chrome logo there and the Drive logo there has a little highlight underneath. That means that app is currently running. The others are just sitting there waiting to be launched. And if you have an app that is not in the shelf and you'd like it to be, when you go to Files and you go and find the app that you're trying to launch, you can actually just right-click it and say, pin it to the tab. And you can see there's an option there to pin or unpin, so you can add them to the shelf. And interestingly, you have the option of launching these things either in a new window or a new tab. So if you're the kind of person who actually coming from the Windows world and you actually like your applications launching in separate windows rather than in separate tabs within the same window, you can actually choose the option in a new window, and then these applications will behave as though they're sort of pseudo desktop applications for people who want it to do that way. So we're trying to give you more choices. And
that last little point there is an important one, I think you make, Chris, is but the fact that you can hide that shelf as well. So if you want to make your screen full size, it will do auto hide, and you can also put your shelf up on the side, so you can put up on the right hand side, left hand side, or at the top if you're feeling really crazy. So you can drag that little bad boy around as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Next slide. Screenshots. I have never worked with a machine that's as easy to take screenshots as this. I can never even figure out how to take screenshots on a Windows machine. On the Mac, it's pretty easy. You got like Control-Alt-Shift-4 and all sorts of keyboard shortcuts. Here, it's basically that overview button. So Control Overview will take a screenshot of the screen. Control Alt Overview takes just the active window, and Control Shift Overview button will let you drag a box around whatever you want. Once it takes a screenshot, it actually saves it automatically to your computer and gives you a little pop-up box that says to copy it. So if you're putting a slides presentation together, like I was last night doing this, you can essentially just really easily take a screenshot, copy it, and then paste it directly into your presentation. It's literally like 2 clicks and you're done. So simple. Next slide.
Yeah, so I'll give you a mouth arrest there, Chris. You've been going great, mate. Have a drink if you're half full. So the keyboard shortcuts are interesting. So carrying on from Chris's last one there about screenshots are really simple to take, and when we're using lots of different applications, there are multiple keyboard shortcuts we can use for them, and just about every app you'll find will have some shortcuts in them. So how do we find them? Well, if you do a Control Alt and question mark, it will access the list of keyboard shortcuts. And interestingly, in every different app you're using, so if you're in Google Earth, for instance, same deal, it will bring up the shortcuts for that, and Drive and Sheets, whatever. So wherever you are working in, if you hit that Control Alt and question mark, it will pop up the keyboard shortcuts. Now, obviously, if you're doing a little workshop on how to do things, it's a really handy page to screenshot it and dump into a handout or a resource page. So you can grab all the keyboard shortcuts for that thing that you are currently working on. All right, let's just jump forward to the next one. So the desktop wallpaper you can change. There are lots of different ways you can do it. Simply, as we all know, you can grab your own photos and throw them in, or use the pre-made ones. And it's as simple as on the desktop, a right click or an alt click will then pop up a little box saying, what do you want to do with wallpaper? So you'll see that pops up down the bottom. Set the wallpaper, and there's your auto hide the shelf as well. If you are managing your Chromebooks, that's something you can also centrally manage. So you might have the school banner, you might have a link you want to go to, so you can manage how your Chromebooks look at your school using the admin console for that. All right, Rich, let's go forward. So the app launcher sits at the bottom of the screen. So there are a couple of ways of finding it. Now, you can click the launcher icon, which is the little one with the red circle around it down there in the bottom left-hand corner, and it will pop up your list of different apps you have. On the little right-hand side of where the apps are, you see there's 2 dots. That will take you to the next page of them, depending on how many things you have added into your Chromebook. You can drag them around just like you can on mobiles and create little groups if you want to have them all easily grouped in your launcher there. And also you can hit the everything button to pop that launcher up. So you can see the search is up the top there, and the search, as Chris said, will look at your files, the things that are on your Chromebook, and all the things you have stored as well. So that's that app launcher you can find in there.
Hey, Steve, I might just jump in there for a second. I actually put a slide in about this, but it's worth mentioning. So I've got a Chromebook here which folds into a tablet. And I just want to show you, when it's like this, it's a regular like desktop, like laptop machine. When I fold that over into laptop mode, you'll notice that it actually turns into tablet mode. So it actually gets kind of almost like an iPad-y kind of look, where the icons are spread out on the screen, and it starts to now behave like a tablet, including it has a whole bunch of gesture controls now where you can swipe applications to the side and swipe them away. It actually changes its behavior between laptop mode and tablet mode, and the UI physically changes to be the most effective for those 2 different situations.
Georgina, great question. Yes, it does. So that's one of the things you always, when you flip backwards and you put it down on something, do you end up typing a whole lot of gobbledygook? No, you do. They do switch off, so you're just using it in tablet mode, which is brilliant, because I wondered that as well. But yeah, that does that exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
All right, Rich, let's jump forward.
Yep. Oh, I'll jump in here if you want to.
Yeah, go on. Yep, go on.
So we've talked a lot about different apps that you can use, and we're going to talk a whole lot more in a second about a whole lot of interesting ways you can approach the app situation on a Chromebook. There's essentially 2 main ways you can find apps. One is called the Chrome Web Store, and when you come to the Chrome Web Store, you'll find mainly Chrome apps, or, as Rich will probably point out, the new version called PWAs, Progressive Web Apps. But the Chrome Web Store is one place where you can find apps to run on Chrome. When you come in here, and the easiest way to find the Chrome Web Store, of course, is click on the everything button, type in on the search there, Web Store, and you'll find it. But you'll find thousands of apps, extensions, themes, games in the Web Store. And there's a filter on the side there. You can see if you want to filter and just find something that runs offline, or something was made by Google, or something that works with Drive, you've got some nice filters in there as well. And if you're in a school situation and you don't want your students, for example, just willy-nilly installing apps, you can actually control this. The administrator can actually be the one to push out apps to the machine, so you maintain some sort of control over that as well. On the next slide, we look at the other place you can find it. And so most modern Chromebooks now can also run Android apps as well as Chrome apps. Now, think about what that means. Most of you have a phone. If you've got an Android phone, or even on an iPhone, you know, when you go to your app store for your phone, there are thousands of really great apps in there that run on your phone. Well, all of those Android apps will also run on a Chromebook, or the vast majority of them, I should say. You know, particularly the most popular ones now are really being optimized for running on Chrome OS. And so, you know, if you can find an app that, or if you've got a use for something and Chrome, the web isn't kind of cutting it to do that, there's a really good chance you'll find something in the Android world that will do what you need. and it will run on your Chromebook.
Hey, Chris, are you sure that's a screenshot of the Android web store? Because those top left ones, are you saying those top left ones that don't look like Android ones, do they actually work on a Chromebook?
Well, yeah, so Microsoft make all of their apps as well. They make Android versions of the Office suite. So, you know, if you are in a situation where you want to run Chromebooks for some of the benefits that Chromebooks offers, which is, you know, the cost and the manageability and the security and all that sort of stuff, but you really still feel like you have to be running, you know, Microsoft Office apps for some reason, you've still got that option either through, you know, we'll talk about it in a sec, but Word Online, but also the Android apps of those apps as well. So, yeah, trying to give users as much choice as possible. There are a couple of built-in apps on the.
Who's that guy?
Who's that handsome gentleman? So there are a couple of built-in apps. So there is a camera built into Android as well. If you've got, if you happen to have a machine with a forward, like a world-facing and a forward-facing camera, it will access both cameras. So, you know, just like you see, you know, when you see kids walking around with their iPads taking photos, it looks a little silly. Like kids and old people seem to do that a lot. My mother does anyway. So you can do that with your Chromebook. You fold your Chromebook over into a tablet and take photos with it if you want to, because there's a camera app built in. And of course, there's a gallery app as well in there that manages the photos that you take using that camera. And it's got some pretty rudimentary sort of basic image editing stuff in there, but it is built in. And the other thing that's built in on the next slide here is also, you know, like all good operating systems, it needs to have a calculator. So it's got a pretty good calculator built in as well. It's just either a standard one or a full scientific one.
Cool.
And then,
do you want me to jump into this one, Chris?
Yeah, go for it, mate.
Cool. So built into the Chromebook is a whole bunch of really cool accessibility tools. And when you pop down to the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you can pop the little settings box up there, and there is an accessibility link in there, which you can see is that little picture of the person with their arms stretched out at the side, which I don't quite understand why, but that's what the person's doing anyway. It kind of looks like an exercise button. So there are a whole bunch of things you can do with built into the Chromebook. So this is not anything to do with any add-ons, any extensions. So you've got a whole lot of stuff in here that is really great for accessibility. Now, a bunch of us do use the idea that you put a circle around your keyboard, so you get, sorry, not around your keyboard, around your mouse cursor. So down near the bottom, it says highlight mouse cursor. So it puts a nice big red circle around it so you can find it, and then it disappears once it stops moving. You can have a magnifier, you can have a screen reader, you can do your select to speak as well. And the top one there is also spoken feedback, which I've never used because my computer keeps telling me off for doing things wrong. So I generally have that switched off as well. But there's a whole lot of things you can do, and these are all built into your Chromebook. So there's a list down there on the left of what you can do. All right, Rich, just jump forward.
All right, well, hand over to you, Rich. You probably have some technical background you want to just mention on some of the stuff we've just said.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything that Steve and Chris have just spoke about, most of that stuff can be managed directly from the admin console. So for those that are administrators or helping their schools out, pushing all these functions out, you can do this directly from the admin console. So first up, Chris spoke about how you can mount file shares and SMBs and all sorts of things from Dropbox into your local files. What you can do as an administrator is you can mount these for your students. Now, I know that's something that you can do in the Windows world, but we've also brought it to the Chrome world as well. So very, very easy for them to do. And you typically know that if you ask a student to mount their own file server or their own path, they're not going to do it, or they're not going to even know where to start. So you probably want to do this for them. Simple things such as managing bookmarks and loading startup pages, you can do that for your students as well. So you can have them pre-populated. As soon as they turn on the device, you can have multiple pages across the screen. Probably don't put too many across there. Don't stress them out too much, but maybe one or two that you want to preload. All those function keys that, all the keys that Chris spoke about right at the start, if you don't like them, and we're not going to get offended if you don't like them, you can change them back to your standard function keys if you would like. You can put little stickers over them, whatever you'd like to do. But in the admin console, you can push that out as a policy so that the users have the ability to change that. Or you can stop them from not changing it. And you can be like that if you like. Pushing out wallpapers. So again, a very standard thing, but if you're at a school and you want to have that uniformity of having everyone with the same wallpaper so they know which school and remind them which school they're at, by all means, you can push that out as well. So some really handy features there.
All right, awesome. All right, I'm going to do a real quick run through here, what I've done to try to make it easy for you guys. We'll go to the next slide, please, Rich. I've tried to do a little mapping of, like, if you are coming, like if your school did decide you want to make a switch to Chromebooks, or if you're thinking about it and wondering if it's feasible, and you're coming from the Windows or Mac world to Chrome OS, like if you used to use a particular tool and you come over to Chrome OS and that tool's not there, like, what do you do? Like, how do you deal with that situation? So I put together a little guide here for you. If I used to use this, now I can use this. I'm going to go through it really quickly. Well, Steve and I will probably try and do this together. But to make it easy, I've made a little cheat sheet for you with it was going to be a 1-pager. It turned out to be like a 6-pager because there's a lot of different options. So we'll go next slide. And just like if you were in last week's session, you heard me say this, that learning's about doing things. And I get very frustrated sometimes when I hear schools go, oh, I can't possibly use Chromebooks because I need to use Microsoft Word, or I need to use PowerPoint, or I need to use whatever it might be. Like, learning is not about a particular tool. Learning is about kids creating, presenting, designing, persuading, comparing. Those are the verbs of learning, right? So which tool we use to do it really shouldn't be something we get hung up on, right? We should be worrying about the learning, not the tool. Okay, so that said, I want to point out, if you used to do word processing with Word, you can do it with Docs. If you used to use Excel, you can use Sheets. If you used to use PowerPoint, you can use Slides. That's a fairly simple, basic transition. There's a link down the bottom there that says bit.ly/switch to Chromebook. If you want to click on that link, or sorry, if you want to type that into your browser, another tab, I've laid all this out in a doc for you with not only these suggestions, but a whole bunch more as well. So, you know, if you used to have Outlook, well, Gmail and Calendar pretty much can do what you need to do in Outlook. If you did desktop publishing and you use something like Publisher or even InDesign, you'd be surprised what you can do with Google Slides as a publishing tool. It's actually incredibly capable. But if you really need to push beyond that, there's a great tool called Lucid Press, which is green blobby things there, right? Amazing tool, and integrates directly with InDesign files as well. If you've come from a graphic design background and you're used to using Illustrator, I mean, and again, I probably said this last week too, but like I'd rather, if I'm doing a graphic design task with kids, I'd rather them go and make the poster rather than spend 6 weeks learning how to use the tool to make the poster. Mm-hmm. So something like Canva gets them the result really quickly instead of needing to worry about, you know, learning this complicated tool. The thing next to that, the yellow thing there, is a tool called Gravit. If you really do want to be an Illustrator guru, Gravit is like Illustrator online.
And Canva are doing a great deal for teachers where they give you the full version of Canva for your class as well.
Correct, free for teachers and students.
Exactly.
Steve, you want to do this one?
Yeah, you've changed the top one on me, Chris. So looking at graphics, you know, if we use the old Photoshop or the Paint, we can use Infinite Painter, which I've had a good play with recently. So that's the red brushstroke one. And what's the Koru shape one there, Chris, on the right?
It's called Photopia, or Photopea, depending on how you say it. But Photopia, it's like an online-y kind of Photoshop thing.
Nice.
It's pretty impressive. Yeah.
Next line down, we have our video editing. So we got the iMovie, or the old Windows Movie Maker that we used to have way back in the 90s, and people tried to hold on to. So we can obviously switch it up with Screencastify and WeVideo, both who are online. Great for doing recording yourself, but also for getting students to record themselves and they can become the teachers. So some brilliant tools there. For photo editing, of course, we can use Photos. There's a whole bunch of editing built into Google Photos, and Snapseed as well. If you have a look at that, I remember the first time I was introduced to Snapseed, I opened it up, and wow, there's all these different controls to make my photos look absolutely amazing. So again, online, real simple, but real powerful as well.
Snapseed is amazing. Like I compared it there to Lightroom because Lightroom's kind of the standard there, but Snapseed honestly does nearly everything anyone could possibly want. It's an Android app that's running on Chrome. So on this page here, audio production, if you've used something like GarageBand or even Audacity to do wave kind of editing, you probably want to look at, there's a few things. Flat.io, that's the blue stripes there. Flat is a music notation service where you can compose things. Soundtrap, the purple one, it's almost, I call it GarageBand for the web. It's collaborative and it operates in a very similar way to GarageBand. Multimedia creation, I don't even know what you use in the Windows and Mac worlds these days for this sort of stuff. It used to be Flash. And I guess it depends on how you define multimedia. But, you probably want to look at something like Explain Everything or even Book Creator. And in the animation world, you've got things like Toontastic, which, again, is an Android app running on Chrome OS, or the stop motion animator tool there. So, am I claiming that some of these web-based tools are as complicated or as sophisticated as some of these others? Of course not. Like, there is only one Photoshop. I'll say it. And there's really no alternative. Photoshop is Photoshop. It's 35 years of development. It's not going to be replicated easily by anything else.
But you do make a good point, Chris, that you don't want the kids spending a week learning how to use Photoshop.
Correct.
And then two minutes to go before handing in actually making something. Let's give them something that can do a lot to start with, and they can build up their skills on it. Maybe they'll find something else, So you could sort of compile this list in your class with the kids going, what are they using?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of coding, I mean, I put a little logo there for, I think that's Visual Studio. But, Shift Edit is an online IDE. You've got Lee, yes, there are education plans for WeVideo, absolutely. The orange icon there is Android App Inventor, which is building apps with coding, with block coding and stuff that go straight to your phone, and you can actually have working apps on your phone. 3D printing, Tinkercad, SketchUp will do exactly the same sort of thing that you might have been doing with AutoCAD. And if you've used Acrobat before to do PDF annotations, you'll probably get the same kind of results out of a tool called Cami.
For sure. Yeah, Tinkercad is great. I mean, the thing about Tinkercad as well is it teaches that the basics of 3D design with a couple of kind of intros to it, and then you can start building and tinkering and playing and building stuff in front of you, which then you can print or send to a printer if you want to as well. Yeah.
When I was putting these slides together, what was increasingly obvious to me was that in almost every category of software now, every class of software now is usually either 100% web-based or there's a web-based alternative to it in most cases. So, if you think about it like that, there's almost nothing you can't do on a Chromebook. And if you look at all those logos floating around on the screen there, some of them you might recognize, some of them you might not. But almost every modern piece of software now is born on the web, is designed to operate on the web. And I'm telling you that all these people that have software that doesn't operate on the web, guess what their number one priority is right now, right? Figuring out how to get their software to run on the web, because if they don't, they're going to be irrelevant. And so, I think that's if you're thinking about Chromebooks, making the switch to Chromebooks, I think you'd be pretty confident that the ability to live on the web is not, we're not guessing that anymore. We know that's how it is. This is the world we live in. It's the world we're going to be living in.
Yeah, a large part of that, Chris, is the fact that for huge areas of the world, the mobile device is the one interface they have with learning. So, stuff's got to go mobile and stuff's got to be touch enabled. And it's got to be able to be used on a web browser to be able to capture those people and bring them into the education space, because not everyone can drop a couple of $1,000s for a laptop,
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Rich, you have anything to add?
Okay, yeah, that actually brings me on to the next point. So Chris and Steve talking about the future of apps and where this is going and all these providers wanting to take their stuff online. Well, guess what? That's what we call PWAs, so progressive web apps. Now, progressive web apps are applications that go across multiple platforms. So the developer builds it once, they build it across iOS, they build it across Android, it goes everywhere, right? And so Chromebooks can utilize PWAs. And as an administrator, you can push those PWAs out. Now, a good example of a PWA, if you've got time on your hands at the end of this, is if you go to open.spotify.com, you will see there's a little plus button in the URL bar. So you can download that app straight from the web browser to any device that you've got running, whether that's Windows, whether that's Chrome, doesn't matter.
Those of us with long memories, Rich, might recall that when the iPhone was originally released, it didn't come with apps. The original intention of the iPhone was that everything was going to be a web app. It was just too far ahead of its time at the time. But that's definitely the future's arrived now.
Absolutely. So Chrome apps and PWAs, very similar in their style. They can be pushed, they can be forced onto the device. You can pin them to the task, the little bar at the bottom that Chris was talking about. And you can do these not only for the web apps, but also any Chrome extensions you have as well. Chris mentioned Android apps. Again, we can push those. We can turn them into kiosk mode. But wait, there's more. There's Linux apps as well. I feel like it's a daytime TV ad. if you get a Chromebook, you also get Linux apps as well as part in this little container off to the side. So if you're a developer and you want to tinker a little bit more, you can allow your users and push those Linux containers out to them, and they can play around, they can code, they can do all sorts of things in there.
And some of those really powerful design apps are available as Linux apps. And so, you've got those kids that are kind of next level up from Tinkercad and might want to go into some of the more involved design. If they are available with a Linux app, then you can run it within your Chromebook as well. Yeah,
I didn't make a big deal about that before, but I've on one of my machines here, I've got the GIMP and Blender and a whole bunch of open source Linux apps running on a Chromebook, and they work perfectly well.
And then lastly, we've got kiosk apps. So for those that are running, CBT, so computer-based testing, or you're using digital signage or anything like that, you can actually push those applications out to a device. So as soon as they boot up, or whether you open the lid, it goes straight into those applications ready to go. So for those that are in Australia, that you're probably looking at the NAPLAN online testing that happens yearly. That's an application that's developed for Chromebooks. As soon as you open it up, the student can go straight into the NAPLAN app without logging in. So very, very good system, very easy to use.
Nice. All right, next slide. We're going to hear some stories.
That was creepy, Chris.
What's that?
That was creepy as. Nice.
Nice. Brent, would you like to introduce Sharon?
Happy to do so. You put me on the spot. I'm like, Sharon, maybe, when did we first meet? It's been a while. We go back.
Yeah, I started I started working in an IT role here in 2017, but that was when I had no idea of anything Google. So it must have been either late 2017, 2018, maybe.
Fair enough. Yeah, I moved from our team in New York to Sydney in the mid 2017. So it was probably shortly thereafter. And I recall that you were helping out, but yeah, now you're fully in your role. And I have to say, it's always exciting to see when someone has a passion for what technology can do in the classroom, and it's just looking at what all is out there. And if I had to go back and think back to our initial conversations, it was the exploratory phase. And now you have taken George's Hall and you have done some really impressive things when it comes to bringing in devices and being savvy about looking into things like Neverware and all that good stuff. So yeah, that's our story. It's been a long, good one. And yeah, it's a pleasure to introduce you such that you can talk about the fact that you've gone from that exploration phase to becoming an innovator yourself, and now George's Hall being recognized as a reference school. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you, Sharon.
Yeah, as we said, I started in 2017 with absolutely no idea about Google Classroom or anything, and we started off the G Suite path, and now we've got Chromebooks here. I'd never heard of Chromebooks either. I live in Sydney, so I was able to go to a lot of the presentations that were held at the Google head office, and I took advantage of either school holidays or after school presentations. And I think to start with, we ordered 15 Chromebooks. We have to buy through our Department of Education list of things to buy. So we started off with 15 because we said that was half a class worth because we don't have one-to-one devices at all here. So we started off with half a class worth, and we tried them out, and now we have 230 Chromebooks in our school. Kindergarten classes have 6 Chromebooks each, and the teachers use those as...
Hang on, 6 Chromebooks each? What sort of rich school are you?
6 Chromebooks in each classroom in each kinder. And so they basically use them as either a literacy... during literacy groups, that's one of the stations, or in maths groups, that's one of the stations. It's quite funny now having them in my computer lab here, which is all just desktop PCs, and how I point to something for them to click on, but they touch the screen because they're so used to Chromebooks and the touch screen. Most classes have a mixture of devices as we go up to year 6. there's more devices in the classroom. So it's probably 50-50, because I think we've got probably 300 laptop PCs. So what I'm finding now, though, is that if I'm in a classroom, the devices that are chosen by students first are the Chromebooks, because one, they'll be charged, even if they've forgotten to charge them. They start quickly. They don't update in the middle of something. They, like you said at the very beginning, they just work. So the students, just by using them, by their choice, is they pick the Chromebooks first. As Brent said, our school also trialled the Neverware. So as old laptops die in a way, we're lucky here we've got a IT coordinator, and so she just turns them into Neverware Chromebooks, and so we've got about 40 of those as well. She even turned a desktop PC into Chromebook. So I don't understand that part of it, but there's a Chromebook that's a desktop PC in a couple of the classrooms. So it just means you're not wasting the devices, and those old laptops or desktop PCs won't work otherwise. So it gives us another working device, because we are a public school. You know, we're constrained by budget and things like that. So, yeah, I don't know. What else do you want to know?
No, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that story, Sharon. It's great.
Yeah. So I felt like I was taking a bit of a risk at the beginning. That's why we only went with 15. But it worked out. And so now we probably buy some of everything. But I did go to a Google one when we could still go into Google, where you showed us the Acer Chromebooks, and we did buy a lot of those because they were a bit more durable, we felt, and things like that. So it's good to be able to have presentations like that, so we can actually have a play and a look at them before we then spend our budget on what devices.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, Sharon, and there might be some other questions for you as well, but I was actually specifically thinking about that, and in just a moment we'll kind of run through to close out the presentation, just, finding the right Chromebook and what does that mean. I was wondering if you have any thoughts. I know you mentioned that you were looking at different ones, and the Acer one seemed to be durable, but just from an everyday, so durability is certainly one thing that people would be looking, one of the features that folks would be looking for. In terms of the other devices that you've looked into, I'm just curious, do you see similarities, or are there certain things you gravitate toward, or what's your thought there?
Well, because, as I said, because we're Department of Education, we're actually limited by the choice. So it will come down to price. And also the ITC coordinator, she gets involved too, because she talks to the suppliers a lot. And she's finding now that sometimes it's the way to charge it, is some things that we buy come in, that gets damaged more on certain different ways that the charger attaches to the device. So I know that's a weird thing, but she's finding problems with that. So she's really had no problems with the Aces that we went for. And that's sort of, it's the choice we get. We have a limited choice anyway. It's our durability, because they're shared in the classrooms, and it's K-6, so they're not always as careful with them. We hope they are. And and the price, but the price within our department choices are always reasonable.
Hey, Sharon, you're saying that some of the kids are kind of porting on the screens that when using the old big old desktop. So do you have the touchscreen Chromebooks as well, or just
No, we've got the touchscreen Chromebooks. So because of COVID, usually our kindergarten students get to come to the computer room all year. Luckily here in Australia, we didn't shut down for very long, but it was right where we would have been having them in the lab here. So they've really only started coming to the lab this term. So they don't have strong mouse skills and things like that. But if I'm in term 3, I was going into the classroom and working with them, and they just open their Chromebook and log in with their, like, we all have little login cards, and they were able to do that very easily. It's just the difference on a desktop PC is we've got to develop some mouse skills, because they seem better at the trackpad than the mouse skills. It's quite interesting, and then they wanting to touch the screen for things. So it's just they learn how to do things. They got to adapt to the school situation, because sometimes your lessons are in here on desktops, but at least in the classroom they do have the touch screen. Like, and that's what we've gone for, is the touch screen.
Cool.
Nice. All right, Brent, you want to tell us about all these different Chromebooks?
I will unmute myself, and yeah, am I back to ownership, Rich?
If you want to go down to the right slide.
Well, it depends on which window I've got it open in, because I've got it. Why don't you drive for me, if you don't mind?
I think a bunch of schools I've been talking about Chromebooks, as Sharon was saying, as if you can get those touchscreen Chromebooks, they do open up, thinking about these apps. So many of them work so beautifully with a touchscreen. If you have a stylus as well, then it obviously brings up a whole lot of new things you can do with those Chromebooks. So it becomes that for a little bit more money, you actually open up a whole lot more learning available for your students with what they can do with those touch screens.
Yeah, I did forget to say, yes, our Aces do have the stylus, and that it fits back into the into the Chromebook, so that's good. And the kids worked out they were there before we even told them.
The other thing you consider too about styluses, like this stylus is from an Acer Chromebook, and it's what's called an EMR, electromagnetic resonance stylus, and there's a new standard now called USI, Universal Stylus Initiative, which means basically the stylus will work on a whole range of machines. But the neat thing about it's not paired to a specific machine. That's point one. So this stylus will work on any machine that works with this stylus, not a specific machine. But the other thing about it is that there's no smarts in the pen. So the pen's cheap. Like if you lose the pen, you've lost, I don't know, $20, whatever it is. I don't know how much they are, but they're cheap. Whereas, something like, I don't know, some other pencils type styluses you might be able to buy on the market where the smarts are in the pen itself, they tend to be quite expensive. So losing it, like an Apple Pencil or something, is kind of a big deal. You don't want to do that. And the neat thing about that, I see a lot of schools now where they have like group Chromebooks, and they'll have the same way they used to have like a tin of pencils in the middle of the desks for the kids. They have a tin of styluses, and a kid can grab any stylus, do their work on the stylus, put it back in the tin, and it doesn't matter because they're not matched to any specific machine, and they're not super expensive if they did get lost. So something to consider.
Cool. Rich, yeah, I've only got it open in one place, so if you want to try to pass the baton once more, but if you're going to have to click back through the slides. I don't know why it's... There we go. Okay, it is working. It's just a bit of a lag. So I've got a nice little love a good marketing video here to play in the background, but I think I let this roll because Chromebooks are designed for lots of different types of learners and lots of different types of working styles. So whether you're the motivator or the communicator or whatever it might be, we'd like to think that Chromebooks can be used by a wide audience of users, be it students, and a lot of the devices you see here and what Sharon has spoken to is just kind of what we would call our base performance device, where if all you're needing to do is to collaborate and to use Google Docs and things of that nature, by all means, everyday student device, it's great. But in a moment, we'll actually look at some of the higher spec devices. I mentioned I've got probably 7,000 tabs open right now, and so a base Chromebook doing lots of video editing and lots of data pulling might be better for me. So a worker or learner like me to have a bit more of a peppy Chromebook. For all intents and purposes, everything that we've spoken about today, the management, the cloud-based management, utilizing G Suite. A Chromebook is a Chromebook in many cases at the end of the day. It's little things like durability that Sharon mentioned, or if you're looking for a higher screen resolution, maybe having that touch screen with the stylus. It's the little nuances like that. And so I really would pause and say, what is it that you're trying to do? That's where you want to begin when you ask yourself, what Chromebook is best for me? A lot of people will come to us, and I think that not going to name any company in particular, but a lot of people will come to us and say, I want the Google Pixel Book, because they know it's one of the highest price tagged devices, and it is shiny and sleek and thin, and it's great. And I love that for traveling, but I will, this isn't talking negatively about Google native hardware, but I actually find that some of our, all OEMs make Chromebooks today. We started out with Samsung being the launch device years and years ago, and now you've got all the major OEMs. Dell, Lenovo, HP, Acer, all the ones that you would know as brand names. But then we also have smaller shops like PC Merge, or I even realized in Japan, I was working with our Japan team, NEC, a Japanese company, makes Chromebooks. We've got a provider in Singapore called GSA. So I think I tell you all of that before I jump into the major models, because we sit somewhere between Apple being a total lockdown ecosystem where nothing rolls off an assembly line unless it's fully Apple produced. And the flip side of that would be Microsoft is much more open ecosystem. There isn't a Chromebook that rolls off the line that Google hasn't given a stamp of approval, but we do not produce all of our hardware. It's obviously done by lots of different folks. So I don't want to bore you with that too much, but you need to ask yourself, what is it that I'm trying to do on this device, and what are the key features that I need or my students need? I'm not going to spend a ton of time looking through all the different OEMs various offerings, but I did just want to kind of highlight, we went from having just a handful of Chromebooks when I joined the team 5 or 6 years ago. Now you've got all of your OEMs are creating everything from, and I have to say, I like the way that Acer's kind of laid theirs out, screen size and resolution. Acer's got their 311, which is a basic clamshell, working all the way up and over to, the more advanced, larger screen, enterprise grade Chromebooks. Acer's here showing the clamshell options, the convertible options, what that looks like for them. Dell has a number of devices. You can see they kind of show their offerings between K through 12 and higher ed. HP chooses to go the route of clamshell versus convertible, and then focusing on the higher spec 14-inch device. Here we've got Lenovo. Now, I will point out Lenovo actually, and it's the first that we've seen in the Australian and New Zealand market. Lenovo actually has the Chromebook tablet. Be very transparent here. Google, knowing how popular a certain piece of fruit that has a bite taken out of it has been throughout educational history, their tablet offering. So Google has on numerous occasions brought a tablet offering into the market, but Lenovo has the latest and kind of next gen, I'll say, that you might want to have a look at if you're looking at potentially replacing tablets with the Chromebook offering. So you can see that there if that's something that is important to you.
And Brent, the thing about that tablet as well is because it's a Chromebook, it is fully manageable like any other Chromebook as well.
Exactly. Just the form factor, right? It's tablet form, but inner workings same as a Chromebook. So that's good to point out. Rich, I will ask you really quickly, if you don't mind, since you're driving for us, if you'll quickly go out to the internet wherever you're presenting, and just I like to pull up, if that's possible, curveball for you, and just look up. We've got lots of different resellers across Australia and New Zealand. LWT, Learning with Technologies, is the one that I generally refer to because they actually have a public-facing website where you can see lots of different models. I think, Steve, you might attest. This is Noel Leeming or PB Tech, I think, also offers. So sorry for being so Australia-centric. But yeah, Rich, if you don't mind just popping up to Learning with Technologies website, and then if you go to Browse Products at the top, and there's a specific notebooks, Chrome. I just want to point out that any of our partners, and especially those that have the public-facing websites, you're going to get, it's in the center there. I know. Don't search for C because it's notebooks-Chrome. But you can see, all the different pricing options. You can see the various specs and things of that nature. It's always very fascinating for me to look at the OEMs and how they were producing Windows devices long before they were producing Chrome devices. And if you go to their individual websites, you'll see how you can spec out Chromebooks, just like you maybe you remember buying a home PC back in the day when you could get online and upgrade your RAM or your hard drive, 4 gigabytes here, 10 gigabytes there, whatever it might be. Again, a Chromebook is a Chromebook. I saw the question come through earlier about local storage, and Steve made the point that, if you're starting to do some things with Linux, it might be of interest for you to, pay attention to the hard drive and what you can do locally. But don't get overwhelmed with all the spec'd out Chromebooks that I feel like a lot of the OEMs will offer on their website, just to kind of, potentially, well, you know what I'm saying. So, but yeah, LWT, for those of you based in Australia, New Zealand, or one of the Kiwi websites, just check it out. You can see stock levels, things of that nature, and then you can dive in. I just wanted to quickly mention, Rich, if you don't mind, one last thing I'll ask is if you just sort by price. Generally, for those of you that might be brand new to Chromebooks, generally what you can expect to pay. And the one thing that I do like to call out, if you're going out there to invest in Chromebooks, pay attention to the year, because Chromebooks do have an end of life when you manage them. Now, it's gone from 4 years when I joined the team a number of years ago, and I think we're up to 8 years now. So 8 years from the origination of the device, so 8 years from the day that it was announced and brought to life, essentially, the Chromebook was born. You have 8 years if you choose to manage that device, that we will promise you will get every update and security patch. Obviously, a lot changes in 8 years, and so we can't promise anything beyond that. A lot of schools actually see manageability is totally fine post the end of life. But I do just want to call out, if you see a super affordable laptop online, just make sure that you are aware of what its end of life might be. You can just Google that information, because if it's a year or two down the road, that might be something you want to consider before investing in it. Generally, in Australia and New Zealand, your base device, just a basic clamshell device, $300 to $400. Getting into the convertible devices, you're looking at $400, $500, $600 in some cases. And then when you get into the more advanced or enterprise level Chromebooks with those, faster processors and the really, sharp advanced screens, looking at $800, $900, sometimes upward of $1,000 with all the bells and whistles. Okay, I think I've gone way over in terms of what your options are, but yeah, we have a lot more to offer than we did 7 or 8 years ago. If any of you all are still running those Samsung devices, smoke still coming out of them by this smoke coming out of some of them by this point. But it's amazing to hear schools that are still utilizing devices that are like 7, 8 years old at this point. But it can happen. So I'll leave it there. I wanted to, open up for questions, or if the Google team has anything that they wanted to contribute at this point in time or chime in on. But yeah, that's where we are.
I might just say one more thing. Like, the management of the Chromebooks is very easy. Like, the ICT coordinator, she enrolls them, and that's about it for anything else she has to do. So it does save time with for your IT staff.
And Georgina, you made a point earlier asking about what you're going to do with the Chromebooks and the use of them. And I think if you are looking for some more design-based or some more creative type uses of them, you are going to look for those slightly more expensive ones, as you would with a PC laptop as well. And if you're dealing with a particular supplier in your country, you just ask them the question, what can it do, and is it appropriate for this? And if not, flick one of us a message. We're more than happy to chat about what there is out there, because we're not betrothed to any of our suppliers. We'll give you the dirty story on all of them.
Yeah, just one thing to add, like when you do your setup for your Chromebooks, it's like what Sharon said, it's extremely easy. I actually timed our setup before. When you set up Windows machines, it's going to take you a long time to set up, say, 100 Chromebooks. We timed ourselves, and it took us an hour and a half to set up 120 Chromebooks, and that is from unboxing to reboxing. So we had to unbox, rebox, and it took us 3 people an hour and a half to set up and enroll 120. That's pretty sweet, considering that it takes you a long time to set up Windows machines. when you're buying it.
Thanks for sharing that, Marianne. You have to, next time you do that, you have to video yourself. If any of you all want to nerd out on that, there's some schools that have done that and videoed it and time lapse, put it on YouTube.
Man, when I was a network manager in a school, to do 120 Windows machines, that was my school holidays gone. Not kidding.
Or the dreaded, oh, just bring it in, I'll re-image it for you.
Yeah. Interesting. Thanks everyone for coming along today. I think it's been hopefully informative and useful, and you've got something out of it. That document, the Switch to Chromebook document that I've shared with you, I just put a little link down the bottom there to my email address. If you've got additional things you'd like to see on that list, hit me up and I can add them to it, and we'll keep that as a growing list. Because I think, if people realise how simple it is to make the switch and, to let go of a few legacy things, because there really are alternatives that are quite functional, I think they'll be surprised. Back to you, Brent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. Thanks again for joining. I know we'll stick around for a few more minutes if anyone would like some individualized support. But I know we ran over a bit. So much to share, so little time. We always feel like Willy Wonka on these things. But yeah, thanks so much. We really appreciate your interest and for doing all that you do for students and for bringing the Google for Education team and what Google for Education has to offer along on that journey with you. So keep up the good work, and we hope to see you again soon.
Kia ora whanau.